Manny.
I'm Noah.
This is Devin.
And you're listening to No Such Thing, the show where we settle our dumb arguments and yours by actually doing the research. This week, do the boys need to find God?
There's no such thing. No such thing. No such thing. No such thing. No such thing.
Today's episode was pitched by my wife, and it's about religion and happiness. The question is, does being religious mean you're going to be happier? Over the past few years, there's been something of a resurgence in young people attending church. New data from the Barna Group, which is a Christian research organization, so, you know, maybe biased. It shows that Gen Z and millennials are more frequently going to church, outpacing older generations. So this is out of people who are already churchgoers. But in 2022, church-going Zoomers and millennials went about 1 weekend per month. Now that's up to just under 2 weekends per month. So it's pretty big. Obviously, COVID, whatever. I'm sure there's other factors, but there's also been tons of other reporting on, a rise in religion over the past few years. There's like the trad-cath kind of trend, these sorts of things that you can kind of see ambiently. So we want to find out if religion makes people happier. To start, I guess, why don't we all go around and explain our religious backgrounds? Manny?
Well, my parents are very religious. We are Catholic, we are a Catholic family growing up. There's it's called Eastern Rite Catholicism. So it's basically the brand of Catholicism in the Arab world or in East Africa. But it's still Roman Catholic. It's just a subsect of that. I grew up Catholic, Mass every Sunday. We went to Sunday school. We did all First Communion. My confirmation saint was Saint Andrew because he was the saint of lost items, and I was looking for my Game Boy at the time.
You pick that?
Yeah, you have to choose who your saint is, and they
I can relate.
They
to
kind of hold your hand through it, and you look through them, and here's the saints and what they're the saint of, and I was okay. This makes sense.
Did you ever find the Game Boy?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Congrats.
Thanks to this.
After being confirmed.
Yeah, I think it was kind of loosely related to that.
Hey, who's to say? Devin, what about your background?
My background, my dad went to Catholic school, and his family, he grew up Catholic.
I didn't know we were brothers in this way.
But he had kind of the opposite reaction of because it was forced down his throat as a kid. He was I'm not going to raise. We went to church, we went to Mass every once in a while, usually around
big holidays.
I was baptized.
Okay.
Some major holidays. We didn't go all that often, so I would say there was a vague Christianity in my life growing up, but that wasn't confirmed.
More just a big cultural thing.
You
do these,
Christmas is about Jesus in some way, something like that. But yeah, we weren't overly religious. I never belonged to a specific church.
Okay.
We'd go, this church is cool, and go for 2 months, and then.
And I feel that's probably the average kind of relationship people have to religion, where it's vaguely around the holidays, kind of a reason, some kind of I don't know, amorphous glue to your family, but not something that you're
Yeah, it wasn't a weekly thing.
Do you, have faith in Jesus Christ?
Do I believe in Jesus Christ?
Do I
believe in God?
Sure.
No, not at this point.
You wouldn't consider yourself religious at all?
No, I don't believe in God.
What happens after?
What do I think happens after you die? Nothing.
That's a whole other episode we should do.
Yeah.
It's just never going to church and stuff. It's just I never felt I see what it does for other people, and I'm oh, that's cool. But for me, I don't feel anything. I think I believed in God when I was younger. I think it's something I grew out of with time.
So growing up, my family's Jewish. We always consider ourselves very much more culturally Jewish than religious. We would go to temple for Passover and kind of the major holidays, and we celebrated Hanukkah, but it was very much in the background and not, faith and belief hadn't really very little to do with it. It was much more about family and kind of just doing the things. Yeah, traditions. And I also just think at the time, kind of politically and otherwise, religion was seemed like a much bigger conversation as I felt like there was so much music or other things about being not religious. It felt like bigger cultural touchstone to like kind of point out the hypocrisy of the Christian right and all this stuff.
Remember that Bill Maher?
Yeah, like the Bill Maher,
yeah.
like stuff like that seems so much more popular.
We're making a documentary about religion.
Oh boy.
Why doesn't he just obliterate the devil and therefore get rid of evil in the world?
He will.
He will.
Yeah, it's coming
What's he
up.
waiting for?
And I think that helps explain why now younger people are exploring religion, because that's not like this big pervasive
If you look at it like a pendulum
yeah,
swinging.
it's like that used to be such a major thing of like pointing at, you know, the hypocrisy of, you know, Jerry Falwell or whoever, like these big religious figures.
Joel Osteen.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
yeah.
that whole thing. And like obviously
Katrina.
that's still there and people criticize those things all the time. So it's not like that's gone, but it felt like it used to be like a major talking point, and maybe now just are focusing on just different things where it's like, I'm not going to argue with you about Jesus or whatever.
Talking about this kind of cultural swing back to people exploring religion, it's now, I think, like there's a backlash towards what used to be, I think, called like the Reddit atheist kind of person, where like
I was thinking that too.
which is pretty much that Bill Maher documentary
Yeah,
where it's like, okay, we get it, but you know.
Yeah, so it never really even occurred to me to earnestly explore religion, I don't think. Now I wouldn't consider myself religious, but I'm more interested in religion as like it's interesting when you look at the parallels between all the major religions and all these things are like I was just in Florence and you're looking at, you know, painting over painting over painting over centuries, and it's all the same, you know, 5 scenes.
Yeah.
And there's something at first you see it, you go, oh, those are really interesting. And then you see more and you go, okay, like it's baby Jesus again. It's, you know, then eventually I kind of hit a wall and I was like, okay, wow, it's actually kind of amazing. Like this is what, this is like all people were talking about, were like painting about for forever. It's like, there's a power in that sort of thing.
Sure.
And that got me kind of then thinking more like, okay, there's obviously a real attraction to this. And then, you know, reading more about history or different things and different perspectives on theology, whatever. It's like I'm more interested in an academic way, I suppose. And then kind of it's like wondering how many people who do go to church or temple or whatever every week believe in that stuff literally versus just like, okay, these are good life lessons or whatever, which I think is probably more common than maybe discussed, where it's like, yeah, there's a community aspect of, okay, these are people who live near me who I can talk to or whatever. And, you know, we're learning this or that from whatever scripture.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I get wanting to attend services and be involved in that way, even if you're not personally like looking for, you know, redemption or whatever after you pass this life.
Yeah.
So I think I'm a little more sympathetic, I suppose, to religion than if you had asked me maybe 10 years ago or earlier than that. Moving forward, like my question with this and happiness is, would you get as much out of going to church every week as you would by just joining a sports club or something else, like any other recreational community thing? Like how much does the religious aspect play in versus just like having people around you who maybe aren't just your normal friend group, but something else and you're connected by something different?
I'd be willing to bet that although both the religious activity and the sports activity provide at its core like a sense of community that's like nice and familiar and comfortable, I'd be willing to bet that the religious one feels more important to people because it's like kind of the higher calling, as you've heard before, or like something that might affect what you think happens when you die.
Yeah.
Versus
like the bowling league. It's really fun, but probably not going to get me into heaven, maybe.
yeah. Or like, you know, religion at its core is kind of like selling you on something, right? Like that this thing will happen if you do X, Y, and Z the right way.
Let's get our votes. Are religious people happier than non-religious people?
If I had to guess, yes, because it gives you something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Especially now where things feel like they're so bad, and it's just sort of like, and it also gives, I would imagine it gives your life some sort of, even if you don't understand why things are happening, gives it some order.
Yeah.
If there's some sort of thought that there is some sort of order and there is something beyond sort of the struggle of today, I would guess yes. Yeah,
same. I think it has to do with the level of comfort that you get. If you really believe that if you're a good person your whole life and then you get to go somewhere special afterwards, that gives you a level of comfort and it gives you some direction.
Yeah, even think about when people die, right? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
you're seeing him again, and it's like,
Yeah. I think I lean towards yes as well. My only other thought on it was like, if you're really, like, let's say extremely religious.
Oh, I think it could turn.
And then it could turn where
Yeah.
it's like you're looking around you at all these sinners and
Yes.
kind of just disgusted by everything you see.
Yep.
Then that could make you, you know, more of a recluse or like feel totally alone and isolated if you don't think other people are being, you know, religious in the right way or religious at all. And it's
Yeah,
like, what the hell world is this? So unless you, then I guess maybe you get through to the other side where it's like, well, this is what I have to bear to get through this. And then, but would that count as happiness? It's hard to say. Yeah. On a purely like, I'm going to church every week and, you know, I make these friends and we talk about this stuff. That seems like a net positive in most cases. Obviously, then there's issues with the church or whatever where not everyone's accepted. And a lot of people maybe because of their upbringing then rebel against it and don't, you know, definitely are not interested, even if maybe it would help them in some way. So I'm curious to find out what the research says.
That's a good point. I feel like you said, it's yes and then it's a no, because I think people get lost in it.
It's like what is that called? The bell curve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like yes, no.
Yeah, I think if you hit the right medium level, it can be probably very beneficial.
People talk about like, you know, people online and the like psychosis thing of like, oh, they see the devil and everything, right? It's like, oh, actually, that song wasn't just bad. This is the devil trying to. It's like, okay, imagine living life like that.
So next up, I'm going to look into the research and find out if there is a positive link between religion and happiness. And later, I want to go to temple myself and hear from some religious people and maybe do some praying.
That's awesome.
All of that after the break. We're back. We're trying to figure out if religion makes people happier. I talked to Dr. Harold Koenig. He's a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Duke University. He's been researching spirituality and health for about 40 years.
I had been a nurse, and then I became a family physician. And during that time, I would ask patients how they're coping with their health issues. It was part of what, you know, as a nurse, we had been trained to do. And so I continued that as a family doctor. And many patients would talk about their religious faith. So I thought, gosh, you know, we haven't been trained on this in nursing school or medical school or family medicine or none of those areas. This was completely new for me. And I thought, that's fascinating. Let's do some research and just see how common this is and what impact it has on a person's health. So that's how I got started. So there are measures of well-being and happiness, and they are often maybe 10 questions or 20 questions. And so there are scales that you can administer to give you a sense of how happy a person is. And then you can also measure religious involvement through scales that are assessing dimensions like intrinsic religiosity, a person's connection with God, the strength of their faith and their religious commitment, their frequency of prayer, of scripture study, those kinds of questions. And how often do they attend religious services? These measures are all included in a questionnaire along with the person's age, race, gender, their socioeconomic status, their social support, various other characteristics, and then we look at the correlation.
To get straight to it, here's what his research has found.
One of the first studies we did, actually, now probably over 30 years ago, was looking at this exact question. Was a person's level of well-being or happiness, was it connected with their religious faith and their religious practices? And in fact, it was. Then that's kind of what surprised me and encouraged me then to continue to do research in this area. So then we started looking at depression and anxiety, and then started looking at physical health, including blood pressure, immune functioning, longevity, all sorts of different health outcomes. And they just kept coming up positively, is that those who are more engaged in a faith community, those who had a stronger connection with God, just seemed to do better in every way. Their social relationships were better. You know, their blood pressure, as I said, was lower. Their immune functioning was better. They were living longer, from 7 to 14 years longer than those who were not part of a faith community. It was just continually reinforcing what I had seen clinically as a family doctor.
That's wild. The most fascinating part is how much longer you live if you are engaging in those kind of like regular religious activities. 7 to 14 years is nuts.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
14 years. I could pray a little bit for that.
That's part of what you get out of this.
Well, that makes sense because they talk about, when you think about, you know, how deadly loneliness is.
Yeah.
If you have this built-in community, it's like a shorthand for community, right? To me, right? Of just sort of like
That's a lot
have
of it.
people who you are regularly seeing, you're leaving the house, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're not doing too well, people who are going to be checking it up on you, and you know, you think about, okay, especially as you get older, if people don't have, their kids aren't around, right? You see some older people where it's like, oh God, if that neighbor didn't like just, you know, get some sort of interest in that person, that they would just literally be alone.
And some of the studies look into this too. Like, you're less likely to smoke and drink and gamble and do other vices
People holding
too,
you accountable
that are going to hurt your, you know. So it leads into other things. Pew Research Center did a big study and released a lot of data on this in 2019, looking at the correlation, and it bears out very similar results. They looked at a bunch of countries, but for the US, for an example, like the percentage of people who say they're very happy among those who are religiously active is 36% versus people who are unaffiliated or inactive, it's 25%. That is pretty consistent across the different countries. Some countries like Mexico is much more religious, it seems like.
Right.
Yeah.
So like there, it's like 71% of active religious people are very happy to 61% unaffiliated. But it's pretty much about a 10-point spread across the board.
Which is huge.
It seems like, which is, pretty big. And that also echoes the same things as far as health. They're more likely to be civically engaged too, so you're more likely to vote if you're religious, which
makes sense.
Makes sense too, knowing what we know.
Yeah.
And same with smoking and those things. Religiosity is on the decline overall, societally. That means we're probably going to see societal well-being decrease, which is interesting to think about too. Because it's like, I wouldn't necessarily argue that it's better for countries to be religious.
Yeah.
You know, especially separation of church and state. These like, but it's kind of an interesting thing. Like, what's best for people? You know.
Yeah, which is what you hear from J.D. Vance and like all these kind of MAGA guys who are so against the idea of like a secular society.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid, or they're pretending to be afraid that there might be societal decline if we move further away from like church.
Well, it's the classic thing of like, you take away something and then you don't feel the void, right? So it's like the country's becoming less religious, and you don't build in other ways for people to
kind of,
you know, and you're also shutting down the bowling alleys.
Yeah,
you know, so
we'll get
how
to
am I
that,
going to build community?
Well, yeah, it's true.
You know, and it's the classic, you know, it's like, if you talk about conservatives, you know, getting rid of government programs and saying rely on your churches for that sort of thing, right? Of just sort of like, the church is supposed to fill that void in a lot of conservatives' minds, and which makes sense based on a study, right? Of like the people who are partaking in this stuff are doing better, but it's like, it's crazy to be like, actually, the only way for you to live longer is you got to figure out, you got to be aligned with one of these religions, because we as a government,
we're good.
society, like, we're not going to do anything for you. So
well,
go to church.
There's also a part of the study where it says, like, I'll read this. The data presented in the report indicates that there are links between religious activity and certain measures of well-being. In many countries, the numbers don't prove that going to religious services is directly responsible for improving people's lives. Rather, it could be that certain kinds of people tend to be active in multiple types of activities, secular as well as religious, many of which provide physical or psychological benefits. Moreover, such people may be more active partly because they are happier and healthier rather than the other way around, which makes sense. Like,
it's correlation versus causation.
Yeah, like some total loner who doesn't go to church might not go to something else or be involved in something else too. So it's like, which is the start or which is the cause? It's interesting, like, and I think a valid point to make for sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to know how the social community factor weighed against the faith element by itself. Is the benefit coming from having a community, or does belief itself impact health outcomes? If I go to church every week, but maybe I don't personally believe in God per se, I might still reap some benefits of being involved in my community and all this. How do you kind of balance those things, or what do you see when you look into that?
I think they're both going on in terms of the mechanism. So being part of a faith community reinforces your belief and your commitment. And of course, your belief and commitments are reinforcing your engagement in a religious community. So they are mutually reinforcing. Social activities are part of it. So that's part of the mechanism. But it only explains about 25% of the effect that religious involvement has on happiness. A lot of it has to do with a personal connection with God, believing that life has purpose and meaning and that you're part of God's plan in the world. That this gives you a sense of energy, and that's a big part of it.
So, I mean, you couldn't replace church going with, say, joining the bowling league. You're probably going to see different effects.
You are. You're going to certainly derive benefits, social benefits, and physical benefits from joining a bowling league. But it's not going to have the same impact that religious faith has, simply because, not only is religious faith dealing with behaviors and beliefs and social interactions in this life, it's talking about life after this life, life after death. Kind of the spiritual world that is in some ways maybe connected with the physical world that we live in. So it goes far beyond just the social or even the behavioral and the cognitive aspects of it, because religion really has power in it. There are very few things that people will die for, but religion is one of them.
I was thinking about the community aspect because it's like, all right, well, I'm picturing now like not like a monk necessarily, but basically like a recluse who is very devout. Is that person going to be as happy as someone who is, maybe not involved with their church, but has more of a social life? Obviously, there's going to be a million different factors to control.
Many different factors at play there. But a recluse who has a strong religious belief probably going to be happier than a recluse without such a belief.
Yeah, that I believe.
So in that respect, but certainly the social interaction is a significant part, and that's what the scriptures teach. They teach to love your neighbor, and you can't do that unless you're around your neighbor.
Well, I'd like to disagree with the notion that bowling is not a religious experience. Maybe that's just me.
You haven't bowled a game like I bowled.
Yeah.
You hit that turkey, you're gonna be praying after that.
That's God.
Yeah,
God right there.
It's God talking to you.
Because that was probably my biggest question I was wrestling with, was like that kind of extreme end of it, where it's like if you're totally isolated or something, like how does that benefit you or not?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about a total recluse who is religious, and then a recluse that isn't. Before this episode, I might have thought that the recluse that's religious might not be that as happy.
That doesn't seem very happy to me.
Yeah.
But if you're comparing to a recluse,
like maybe
who's
that
not religious,
maybe that person's like content, with living their life that way, but it does make sense, the kind of the higher calling, the life after death that he's referring to, that it makes sense that would drive you towards contentness.
Then I was also curious about his work with veterans, because I wanted to know how religion does come up in those contexts. And, I was curious, does he actively encourage it, and how he kind of broaches that?
So typically in a clinical situation, I would not encourage people to turn to religion. I would listen to them, take a spiritual history, and try to learn what's been their experiences in the past with religion. Have they left their their home religion because of, hurt and because of their lifestyle now, etc. I would want to learn about that and just see how religion currently and in the past has influenced their health and mental health, and pretty much just walk alongside of them as they're going through various things. I might support whatever religion is there, but I wouldn't necessarily introduce it.
A lot of people, maybe have a very religious upbringing and then reject it because maybe the religion doesn't accept their lifestyle or other reasons. And then they kind of move away from it and never kind of look back. What would you say to someone like that, whether they maybe don't want to go back to whatever they grew up in or are a little nervous about exploring something new? What's your kind of response to that sort of angle?
Yeah, well, there are so many different options in terms of different churches, different religious faith traditions that you could go into, that may be different from the faith tradition that you grew up in. And so there are a lot of options out there. One thing we didn't cover was the fact that religion doesn't always make people happier. And sometimes people manipulate religion in ways that is hurtful for them and for others around them. So, it's anything very powerful can be used in a negative way to create unhappiness and poor health. It happens. People get abused by clergy. There are radical religions where people kill other people for their religion. But if you look overall, it does seem to have a benefit when it's done in a sensible way, in a committed way, and in a way that both encourages love of God and love of neighbor. I think you've got to have both of them in balance.
There's obviously tons of stories and studies about the decline in religiosity. What's caused that? And then the second part is, how do you think that could be restored?
Well, I think the increase in science, which has certainly provided tremendous benefits, to humanity, and the science world has kind of become the new source of truth. For a long time, it was the clergy and the ministers that were, influencing, sources of truth in the world. But that's all changed now. Now there's technology and science that are providing, us with great ability to control things in our world. And that's becoming more a source of truth as opposed to, a person's religious faith. What do we do about this decline in religious involvement? Religion is hard too. It's not like an easy pathway to follow. You have to be self-disciplined. You have to control your natural desires and all of these things. So it's hard to follow. So what do you do about it? Well, I think you want to keep an open mind. Keep an open mind that, what we're seeing and feeling and going through right now in this physical world, this may not be all there is. There may be something more, something that intersects with this physical world in some way that is maybe impossible to study. And recognizing that 80% of the world's population believes in God or a higher power. And so if you're looking at, beliefs in terms of, the supernatural, most people believe that there is something beyond just this life. So just keep an open mind, and, life will teach you lessons if you let it, if your mind is open, and consider maybe attending a church. If you've been part of a faith community before, you might consider going back and seeing if that fits for you. And even if it doesn't fit for you, maybe you ought to force yourself to do it, because, there are tremendous benefits to your health and maybe even your life after death with regard to this. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty easy risk too to take, because if there isn't anything after death, you're not going to be any worse off. You'll just never know. And if there is something, then you'll be better off. So it's kind of, you're not losing anything by developing a belief and engaging in a practice. And we know that these practices do have a very positive effects on your health, your relationships, and even your physical health and your longevity.
So overall, I mean, what do you guys think of this? Does it change your views or like your outlook on religion?
Not really, but it provided a lot of insight about like how people think about this. I think all three of us said that we think that religion's probably makes you more likely to be happy if you believe in it. But it is interesting to hear about the faith part of it versus the community driven part of it, where like if you ask someone who grew up Catholic, for example, just to keep using this example because it's my experience, in America, they're probably not that religious today.
It's like a common trope.
Yeah.
As Catholics grow up, they become less religious.
Right. But there is probably, like if they have kids or whatever and they felt like they wanted to be a part of some community, there does exist like a default way to do that, I guess.
Yeah.
Versus like trying to find like an art club or something like that. Like at least you know that there's going to be something around the corner from you where you could go do that if you wanted to.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
It feels less about the praying and the worship and more about like being a part of a community.
Yeah. It's definitely tied into so much just cultural stuff in like how people are raised, even if it is pretty secular, really, in practice. Devin, any takeaways from this?
Yeah, I guess to me, what it brought to mind is like, okay, religion it's this template for these things that, especially as you're getting older, can help you in life. Like we're talking about community, belief in something beyond yourself, right? Like drive towards something.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not religious. I don't plan on becoming religious anytime soon. You know, when I have kids, I don't plan on, certainly joining a church or whatever. So then it brings to mind to me, what are ways for me to instill these things into my life, my children's lives, that are not tied to a church, that, it's going to take a bit more work, like Manny's saying. I can't just show up somewhere and be like, all right, we're all going to be a community. It takes more work. And, like I think, I don't go to church, but like I go to therapy and like I try to work on myself in different ways. So I think in some ways I'm already doing a version of like, I don't have that thing. So like, what is my thing or my way of doing this? But it is like, there's not as much structure to it.
Yeah. And it's certainly not the case that if you're not religious, then you can't be happy. It's like, there's like, that's a whole different thing.
Now to wrap things up, I'm going to try to connect with a local synagogue here in New York, go to a service and talk to a rabbi to get their take on the value of religion in these modern times.
Beautiful.
Bless
All
up.
right.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
All right, I'm back. This is Noah. What you're hearing right now is the Shabbat service I went to at congregation Beit, Simchat, Torah. I thought it was important for the episode to check out a religious service myself. Not that I was expecting to have a major epiphany, but just to go in with an open mind and really see how it felt. I'll write up some more thoughts on my experience for this week's newsletter, but for now I wanted to share some bits of my conversation with the temple's head rabbi, Jason Klein, about the role of religion in people's lives today. Rabbi Klein broke it down into 3 tenets: belonging, behaving, and believing.
I'm Rabbi Jason Klein. Since July of 2024, I've been the senior rabbi of Congregation Beit Simchat Torah. Mordecai Kaplan, the founder of the Jewish Reconstructionist movement, kind of took the words belonging, behaving, and believing and really centered them around how people have religious experiences. He talked about Judaism as a civilization, and often it's that belonging piece that sometimes gets saved for last when people talk about religion, because people somehow go right to God, 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 or what happens when I die, instead of the piece that often really comes first, which is, have I just found a group of people with whom I'm happy to connect, a community where I feel like I can be myself, a community where I'd want to celebrate simchas, happy occasions in life, or God forbid, mourn or even struggle together. Sometimes I think that ritual gives us a framework to stop and mark certain moments, right? If I'm someone who prays 3 times a day, then no matter what I'm doing, there are going to be 3 times during the day where, at least for a couple of minutes, I stop, I put my feet together, I face Jerusalem, and say 19 blessings. And maybe that's sort of like a little baseline of something, but it feels powerful that even when I feel like the most distracted or the most stressed, that there's a little gift in there to myself, maybe a little focused connection between me and the divine. And sometimes I think that when we talk about words like spiritual practice, right, this idea of practice, that not every time that we do a certain act like prayer, does it make sense to expect to have this like earth-shattering transformative spiritual experience. But by making room for some of these things, we do open the possibility that something different will happen, that we kind of shift our milieu for a moment. Maybe that's what leads into the third piece, the third B of believing, which is possibility, coming to a mentality where we have choices in our life, where there's not just like a simple end of despairing position, and instead creating a space to think about something in a different way, knowing that there could be rituals to mark moments of joy, to really stay in them and not just kind of move on to the next thing. I think some of that ritual behavior can create opportunities. I'm not even sure if the word is to quote unquote be happy, but I do think that when we cultivate the awareness of our happiness, that does something to our brains, and we can kind of come back to that place. So the practical difference between like, okay, that was a delicious piece of carrot cake, now let me move on, versus like, that was a delicious piece of carrot cake. I'm just going to sit here for a minute and think like, wow, that was really special.
No Such Thing is a production of Kaleidoscope Content. Our executive producers are Kate Osborne and Mangesh Hattikudur. The show is created by Manny Fidel, Noah Friedman, and Devin Joseph. Theme and credits song by Manny. Mixing by Steve Bone. Thanks, Steve. Our guests this week are Dr. Harold Koenig and Rabbi Jason Klein. Special thanks to Congregation Beit, Simchat, Torah, and Stephanie Kramer at the Pew Research Center. Visit nosuchthing.show to subscribe to dig into the research and see some other info on the subject. If you have feedback for us or a question, our email is mannynoahdevin@gmail.com, or you can also leave us a voicemail by calling the number in our show notes. Thanks.
No such thing.